Welcome back to the 4th TSM podcast. Woo! Okay, so just to open us up again, we just want to say that TSM is a peer-to-peer ministry that uses performing arts as an outreach method to impact the students of Tucson. So that's who we are. That's what we're doing. Go check out our socials. We're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. And yeah, so this is our 4th podcast.
Very exciting. I'm so proud of you guys. Doing a great job.
No, this is going to be really fun. I'm excited. So today our special guest is Robin Blumenthal.
Thank you for having me.
Woo!
I'm excited to be here, Jonathan.
Heck yeah. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, like who you are, what you do?
Well, I am Robin Blumenthal, and for many years I was a children and family pastor at a local church, Pantano Christian Church here in Tucson. And then about 3.5 years ago, it's hard to believe it's been that, I really just felt called to do more of a citywide ministry. So I stepped out from the church and joined an organization called For Tucson. And in that stepping out and doing more citywide ministry, I was introduced to the whole area of trauma-informed care and adverse childhood experiences. And I remember in the moment just going, how did I miss this after so many years of working with kids and families? So from that time, it became a passion to help other people understand what that means, how it affects their life, their schools, their friendships, their families, their relationships. And now that's what I do full time, is training and doing that, as well as community-wide stuff through Pantano again.
Nice.
So,
that's super cool. Good job on 3 years.
I know, right? Woo!
Woo! So what is trauma-informed care?
So trauma-informed care is like having a different lens that you look on things that are happening in the world or with people that you know. If I see something that happens and I make a judgment about how you respond or how you act or how an organization acts, or when a driver cuts me off in the road, all those things, we often will make a quick judgment and assign blame, or we'll assign that this person is, an idiot or whatever. And we don't really understand that maybe there's more to the story. So if I were to say kind of in a broad nutshell, I would say trauma-informed care is anticipating and knowing that there is more to the story than meets the eye. That what I'm seeing in a person's behavior or actions is the tip of the iceberg, but what might be driving what I see is underneath the ocean, and that's the part that I can't see. So it's kind of understanding that for many people, trauma is what shapes their decisions and their choices.
Interesting. That's so cool. Oh, dang.
Well, if you think about it, that's what sunk the Titanic, right? It was they saw the iceberg, but what was underneath the water that sunk it. And so many times we see somebody yelling or screaming, and we go, oh man, that person's out of control, or that person's a bully, or that person is this. But maybe if we wonder, what is the need that's driving the behavior? What is that upstream thing that's driving what you're seeing downstream?
Yeah.
If we can ask those questions, it helps us change our response, and that is trauma-informed care, so that I can respond in a different way to help you or to be more present for you.
Nice. I like it. So how did you hear about this? Where did you learn about this from? What does that look like?
Well, it's actually funny. I was feeling that God was calling me out of the church in terms of a building, and then doing more citywide stuff. And I was talking to Bernadette Gruber. I don't know if you know Bernadette, but
I think I might.
Yeah, so she used to work at Fort Tucson, and I said, hey, do you ever think that there'd be needs for chaplains in schools? Because you think about how many students struggle with anything day-to-day that's going on. And she said, I think maybe they could, but you really ought to look into this thing called trauma-informed care. I'm like, okay, I've never heard of it. Ended up going to several conferences. And while there, I thought, literally, I remember thinking, I must be the last person on the earth to have heard about this. And then the more that now that I do that training, full-time in schools and faith community and organizations, I realize that it is still more on the forefront of people understanding that. And the more we learn about brain science, that helps us to understand how trauma from childhood or things like COVID affect how we respond to our world. And that changes a lot.
Honestly, and I remember, for me too, I feel that, the only place I heard about it was from you and then my mom at some point, about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. And so I feel that. It's a very, would you say it's a new sort of thing?
It's newer. The original ACEs study, so Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, was done in the 1990s. So when you think about that, you're like, for you, you're like, I wasn't even born probably.
Whoa.
For me, okay, so I'm much older than that. But the reality is that study was a study that was done by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente. And what the basic question is, they were asking, is it possible that things that might have happened to you as a child or to anyone as a child before the age of 18 affects their adult health, their mental health and their physical health? Now we hear that and we're like, well, I guess that makes sense. But really back then, people weren't asking that. And what they found out is not only are adverse childhood experiences so common and prevalent, but they most definitely have an effect on your later health, has an effect on the choices you make. If you look at prison populations, if you look at homelessness, if you look at any business, any organization, you'll find kind of the ripple effects of what maybe happened to a person as a child or traumas that are happening in their life, again, like COVID-19. It changes how people interact with the world around them. And when we understand that, it changes us in that action.
Gotcha. And I don't know. I guess my question is, how do you feel like God's prepared you to do this type of work? Because like, I feel like everybody has trauma of some sort. Everybody has a hurt. Everybody has a story. So like, how do you, I guess, deal with all of that when you hear stories? How do you feel like God has like led you or like set you up for this so that way you're not getting taken advantage of, I guess? I'm not sure if that's the right terminology for it.
That is a good question. And there's never, I guess the big thing I would say is understanding that God brings healing. But let's say I just met you and I didn't know you and
I'm Jonathan.
And you're acting however. And if I'm like, you know what, Jonathan, you just need to know that God loves you and it'll all be fine. Well, I don't know what your experience with the church is, what your experience with God is. Maybe you've been really hurt in a church. Maybe I don't understand what's going on in your life and you may not feel fine. So while I might be able to bring Jesus to you, if I do it in such a way that puts you on edge or triggers, some kind of a response or it makes you anxious or you don't feel safe around me, how can I really be present with you and be who Jesus is? In terms of being Jesus' hands and feet to you. So you think of a lot of times churches, they're like, well, we have the answer. Yes, but how we package that might make the difference between that bridge between us, because it's all about relationship, which is why Jesus came to die on the cross, right? He came to earth. We just celebrated Christmas, Emmanuel, God with us. But if you think of Jesus' ministry, how he interacted with the woman at the well, or how he told the story of the Good Samaritan, it was really about being present in those moments and meeting people's needs and then taking them where they needed to go, if that makes sense.
No, that does make sense.
And I think sometimes as Christians, we kind of forget all that, and we don't really just want to be present with somebody to say, hey, you're not alone. I see you, and you're valued, and I want you to feel safe. And those are all key components of trauma-informed care.
Gotcha. So earlier you mentioned the ACEs. So what is that? How do you talk about that? How does that look?
Oh, great question. Adverse childhood experiences. So when they did this study and this correlation, they asked people questions about in their past, before the age of 18, if they had ever experienced an adult abusing them or neglecting them sexually, emotionally, physically, if they were missing a parent in the home, say through divorce, if they had an incarcerated parent, if they had seen physical violence in the home in terms of domestic violence. So they asked a series of 10 questions.
Gotcha.
What they found was that the prevalence of these was much higher than anyone realized. And the more of these experiences, the more highly correlated health issues were, or even issues like smoking, drinking, alcohol, suicidality, like people who would contemplated suicide or struggled with that. And so it's all of these different traumas that make it harder for us to trust people and to build relationships. So really when we talk about ACEs, like I wouldn't walk around the street and say, oh, let me give you this ACEs test.
Here's a pamphlet.
Right? Because that's not going to really help. I don't know about your story.
Yeah.
And it also isn't just a prognosis, because it's about the protective factors that were in place in your life too. If you have great relationships to help you through those things, things are going to be better than if you go through less trauma but have no trusting relationships to help you. So there's definitely correlations with these protective factors. One of them, the most important one, probably being relationships.
Gotcha. So how do you package that? How do you share it with people? How do you, I guess, in that being sensitive with people and not trying to step on any feet or bring up a trigger or something like that? What does that specifically look like?
So if I'm doing a training, for example, a school or a faith community, I might say the things that we're going to be talking about are really hard. And for some people, these can be triggering or activating. They can bring back memories that you weren't aware that you had, or you weren't, maybe they kind of hijacked what you were thinking.
Yeah.
So it's important for you to take good self-care. If I'm talking about these things and this becomes difficult, then I want somebody to be able to feel like they could step outside and take a few deep breaths, or they could just kind of regather themselves. And I would want people in the room to be aware of that, so that they're like, hey, you doing all right? Like they're not putting them on the spot.
Checking
but they
in on
might
them
walk
stuff.
out and say, hey, are you doing okay, Jonathan? Do
Yeah.
you need anything? Or just say, hey, I might need a minute, but let me just sit here with you. And I think
Nice.
that's probably the most important thing, is to let people know about that. And sometimes we don't really get into the details, because I can just probably say, Jonathan, I bet you that kids who have been through some tough times.
Yeah.
You'd probably be like
Yeah.
that, right? Most of us
I went
know
through high
someone.
school.
There we go. That's a tough time in itself. So if you're like, hey, I've been through some tough times, then let's talk about some things that might help when tough times might come up again. And so sometimes just having those conversations within the context of providing some safety and compassion are really important.
Gotcha. So do you feel like, or how do you feel like bringing this ACEs training to like students? How do you feel like that affects them? How do you feel like how did that work? How did their understanding works, I guess? What's the impact on them?
Well, if I could tell you a story,
Oh, for sure.
I think that will it'll help see why this. So somebody I know a few weeks ago was eating lunch out on a high school campus. It's a relatively smaller high school. And one of the kids was messing around, and he reaches across to a young lady's lunch, and he grabs out of her lunch an Oreo and takes a bite. She jumps across the table and punches him.
Oh.
The teacher, who's watching outside, turns right at the moment of the punch and starts yelling at the girl.
Yeah.
So if that's all you saw, what are some things that you, not thinking about trauma or anything, like what were some observations you might just have if you had just seen all that?
If I just turned around and saw a girl soccer guy, I'd be like, oh, dang. I'd go like one of two routes. Either she's just being like a jerk, just bullying this kid, or two, he did something to hurt her. And so like he's in trouble, but like, I don't know. It'd be a very difficult situation to turn around to, because it's like, oh my goodness.
Right. Or even if you were the other kids, let's say you saw that happen, right?
Yeah.
You're like, dude, you must like Oreos a lot. Like,
Oh,
why
yeah,
are you freaking out? But here's the reality. If you know the whole story, like I do, the kid who took the sandwich and the Oreo, really, he was just messing around.
Yeah.
Right? He's not
playing
doing
a joke.
But the reality is, the person he took it from is somebody who had been in the foster care system for over 3.5 years, often struggled with food. There had been neglect and abuse. They had an issue with people touching stuff and taking things that weren't hers. So his reaching into her lunchbox was an immediate response. It wasn't something she even thought about. She just was like, kind of unleashed, because all of those past traumas were kind of all triggered. So she reaches over, she punches him, and he's like, dude, what is your problem? Like, I was just an Oreo, I'll get you another one. The teacher, of course, exactly like you thought, turns around and is thinking, she's picked this fight.
Yeah.
So you have all these things going on, and if you understand trauma-informed care, or you think, I wonder if there's more to the story, it changes how you act. In this case, the teacher didn't think that. She just starts yelling at the girl and tells her, you need to calm down. You need to take it down a notch. Well, if you're already really traumatized and activated, and I'm yelling at you and putting my finger in your face,
like, oh man,
not gonna help. So she kept saying, stop talking to me, stop talking to me. And she's trying to calm down, but right now, every system in her body is doing what God designed it to do when you feel threatened.
Yeah.
Right?
Fight, flight, or freeze.
Exactly, because that's what happened.
Yeah.
So when the whole story came out, and this person in tears is telling me about it, it was helpful for me viewing it from a trauma-informed lens and helping her to see why she responded that way. Turns out she goes to school the next day, and all her friends are like, dude, what's the problem? It was just an Oreo.
Yeah.
Because the students didn't understand there was more to the story, too. So do you see how that can have a ripple effect in a classroom or a campus or a community?
Yeah.
All of those things, when we don't really understand and we make those judgments without saying, I wonder if there's more to the story. If we can be curious rather than furious, that might get us further. Yeah, I didn't make it up, but it's a great line.
Yeah.
But it helps you get a little further down the road. If the teacher had said, hey, what's going on here? She might have got further down instead of hurting the relationship between her and the student, because she just, as a teacher, she's probably, loss of control.
Yeah.
I better start yelling. And then the whole thing just spirals. And you can probably think of lots of examples in your life where that happens,
I was about to say, I knew kids in high school who would do something, and then without, most of the students don't typically think what's their past? What's their story? What have they gone through? And then it builds a reputation around that person. and then they become a character, and it's like, oh my goodness, they have a story, they have a life, they have trauma they've been through, and it's so hard to like be in that dynamic and see that dynamic building. It's like
And it doesn't mean that we don't do anything. Like maybe in this school, their policy might be, hey, if you hit someone, you have to be sent home.
That's true. Yeah.
That might be okay, but I can do that in such a way to keep the relationship and say, hey, I now that I'm understanding the story, or maybe you're a little too hot for me to understand the story right now.
Yeah.
Let's just take a few minutes to calm down and let you regroup. The body is really pretty quick sometimes at regrouping. God's given us that resilience.
Nice.
But when you feel safe, you're going to get there a lot quicker than if I'm leaning over you. You
And
got
just
5
yelling.
minutes to, you can't control your body like that.
Putting a time limit on it, oh my goodness, that like I feel like it amps it up even more, because it's like you stay
Exactly,
in that
pressure.
secure, like trying to defend yourself situation. Gotcha.
They say that it can take up to 24 hours for that cortisone and the adrenaline to go out of our cortisol and adrenaline to go out of our bodies. So if you think about that, 24 hours, a teacher can't be like, hey, we're just all gonna wait for 24 hours while you calm down. But it helps to know that if I'm like, Jonathan, calm down, that's probably not going to help you calm down like on a moment's notice.
Like yelling at somebody, hey, calm down. It's like doing the exact opposite effect.
Exactly.
So like what things can we do to, when somebody is in that triggered state, to bring them down from that, not high, I guess, but like from that defensive position?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a great analogy. If you think about Bruce Banner and the Hulk.
Yeah.
Right? You've seen all the Marvel movies, right? And if you think about once the Hulk is triggered, something triggers him. Nobody's usually planning for that.
Yeah.
But everybody gives him a little space, gives him a little time, and gets out of his way. They don't just say, calm down, or dude, it was just an Oreo. Like, that's not helping.
Yeah.
But usually giving him a little space, then his body system has to do that. So if I can make you feel safe, and if I can give you that space, the sooner that I realize that you are being triggered or activated, the sooner I can give you that space, the less Hulk-like you've become.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And so giving someone space, or a friend, or I might even say, hey, Jonathan, it seems like when that kid took your Oreo, there was maybe a lot going on, right? No. There was a lot going on. Is there something I can do? Or that must have been hard. Or showing empathy or compassion goes a long way to helping somebody get back to that calmer Bruce Banner state. And that's when you can actually have the conversation with the prefrontal cortex and be like, so what can we do next time, versus when you're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode.
Nice. I like it. So you're mentioning some of those ways that like people can communicate. I was thinking of like in a scenario, like you're in a school, you're a student to student. What would that look like? Is it somewhere in context, or like, because I don't know, in a classroom, you don't really get to take much space, I guess. I'm not sure if that makes sense. But
that's true. But I think one thing is, if we can help students or the population in general understand that we have to learn to kind of be responsive to our own bodies. Like if I feel myself getting angry or triggered or activated, that if I can be taught how to calm my own self down. Like science says, taking 4 to 5 deep breaths is really, it lowers your heart rate and your blood pressure and can calm you. But if I go, you better take some deep breaths, Jonathan, because you're out of control, that's probably going to be counterproductive. But if I was a teacher, for example, or even in a group of kids out on, like, I don't know, you're playing volleyball and it's really hot, and you're just saying like, hey guys, let's all just take a few minutes just to rest and just take some deep breaths.
Those
or
Uno
you could
games.
even say, I need to take some deep breaths. The rest of you can do whatever, but I'm feeling a little out of sorts, even if you don't have the words for it. And you can model that with friends. Teachers can model that to students. Principals can model that to teachers. A pastor can model that to their congregation, because I think that's one of the biggest things we can teach students is how can I stay calm and regulated, because I can't control what you do, but I can control on a good day, right?
Which that's super fascinating, because like when we were talking about the ACEs in the beginning, or like even just the trauma-informed care in the beginning, I was like, oh, this is a somebody to somebody else thing, which it probably is to an extent, but I was like, when you were mentioning like it's a you thing as well, like, I don't know, learning about it, it's been something like, oh, how can I apply those things to my life? How can I apply exactly what you're saying, taking the 4 to 5 deep breaths, taking time to step away from people if I'm super defensive or getting angry or something like that. Like, so that's very fascinating.
And even self-care, like, have I had enough sleep? Or sometimes, and we all get through times,
today?
Right? Or you think of COVID, right?
Yeah.
We all feel a little out of sorts. We can't connect in the ways we used to. We can't do some of the things we used to enjoy. And so our flashpoint our tolerance of stress is a little less right now.
Yeah.
So if you think about the things that are happening in our world, a lot of the political unrest, you
Yeah.
take a whole world that's been under all this stress with COVID, and then you add an election, and then you add tornadoes, and you add all this stuff,
Yeah.
and it makes sense that people are, man, it doesn't take much for someone just to flip, because we're all just on edge. So how do we learn to be present with each other and help support each other and be patient? If you do yell at me, and if I come back and wait till after you've calmed down and say, Jonathan, I don't think I really deserved what you said. Can you tell me more about that? Versus, you're grounded for 4 years. That's not going to be helpful.
Go to your room. No.
That's right.
Which is interesting. I was just about to ask you that. With everything going on in the world, with COVID, with all of this stuff, it feels like you have to be very sensitive when you talk to people. So how do you walk that fine line of like being sensitive? Because everything is triggering nowadays. And so what does that look like? Being sensitive, but also like not being sensitive. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I think if we ask ourselves, I wonder if we can go back to that curious, not furious. If I can say, I wonder what is the need driving that behavior. I wrote a kid's book during COVID.
I read it. Yeah.
And one of the things that helped to inspire that is I was talking to people who were like, if we go outside, our doctor says we're going to die, to people who were like, if you just had enough faith, you'd be fine.
Yeah.
And that's a whole range. So if I understand that you or I or our audience, everybody falls somewhere on that range. And if I can understand that you probably have reasons for where you fall, maybe you've had someone who has died of COVID, or maybe you lost your job, or your parents lost their job. And if I can be more listening instead of, well, I think you're just, mask or no mask, or vaccine or no vaccine, if I can just understand that there's needs that are driving your choices, and I can try to empathize with that. I might not agree with them, but there's probably something in me that also has experienced loss, or that also has been afraid in the past. And I think that empathy is huge when we just listen to those around us, and we can just say, man, it sounds like life has been really tough for you right now. And I can help be present and provide empathy in that way. And then, especially with COVID, right? Because everybody's had their own experiences. Most people have struggled to some extent or another, but your experiences haven't been mine. But we can relate that we've each had a tougher time than we normally would.
Yes. And I think something really interesting that you mentioned kind of is like that comparison, like trying not to compare, hey, my pain is worse than your pain, or something along those lines. Because I feel like that gets very dangerous, because you're like, oh, I'm allowed to feel this, you're not, because my pain is worse than yours. And I feel like, especially with everything going on, with all the, like you were mentioning, there are tornadoes, there's a bunch of school shootings happening, there's fires, there's COVID still happening, like everybody has trauma. And so I think it's very important to, exactly what you said, be compassionate, be caring, remember that everybody comes from a different place, and that pain can be felt by anybody, and stuff like that.
That's really insightful of you, because if you think about it, for many of us, the way we counteract the uncomfortableness I feel with your pain is, I might use the word at least. Well, at least your mom still has a job, or at least, and I know Brene Brown, I don't know if you've ever listened much to her.
I've not listened to her, but I know who she is.
Yeah, and she does some amazing work on empathy versus sympathy, and probably that's the biggest downfall, is to say the word at least. And I've caught myself doing that in the past, and for me, I found that that's actually something I've used to comfort myself, like, well, at least I still have this, or at least we have toilet paper, even though it's COVID, whatever it is. But I have realized that sometimes that I even take away my own opportunity to maybe just grieve, or to feel sadness, or to just feel like, man, this just isn't what I want my world to look like right now. And I think that self-compassion and having grace with ourselves, then it reflects on you. If I can be more compassionate with myself, then I can be more compassionate with you. So I have had to try to learn to not even just use at least with myself, because then I'm more likely to use it with you. And you're right, that's not helpful.
That's a really solid point. Oh, dang. That's really cool.
I hope I remember it as much as I can teach it.
Okay, here's another question. So what's the difference between empathy versus sympathy? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, in empathy, there's a great, Brene Brown does a great, if you just it's like YouTube, empathy versus sympathy, it's like 3 minutes.
Nice.
But probably the biggest thing is she talks about empathy is being with someone. Like, how can I be present with you in your pain, in your sadness, in your joy, in your sorrow, whatever it is? If I can be present, not try to fix it, not try to at least it, not try to lift you out of it, but in that moment, just say, man, thank you for sharing that with me. That took a lot, and I just want to tell you thank you for sharing that. And I think people then feel heard. And if you think about it, that's really, I think, what a lot of people in the world right now, we don't feel heard or seen because of the way COVID has gone and people have been so isolated.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, well, that's very insightful. Thank you.
Oh, well, that's Brene Brown. I can't take credit for that.
Brene
But you should
Brown,
watch the video.
thank you.
That's right. If you're watching. No.
We'll link it in the bio. No. But I think that's really cool, especially what you said about, like, we can't fix things. I mean, like, we can to an extent, but also we really can't fix other people's problems. I mean, I look at all the stuff I've been through in my life, and I love to fix other people's stuff, but also I really can't fix any of their things, and they can't really fix mine. It's on me to seek the help I need or to point them in a direction that they can seek the help they need, but I really can't fix anything. I can just be there for them.
Mm-hmm.
I think,
and that's important. That's really the number one protective factor. When people have had a lot of adversity in their life or with COVID, it's not feeling alone, having a safe relationship. So as Christians, really, what relationship should be safer than knowing a Christian? And yet, probably a lot of people would say that's one of the worst relationships I know, because a Christian makes me feel more shamed or more judged. So how can I hold on to whatever values that I hold on to, but still help you to feel safe and be present with you? It doesn't mean that I necessarily agree with all the things you agree with, but I can still say, I can see where that would be an issue or where you would struggle with that. And I don't have to defend God, right? But I can just say, I think that's something maybe you and God can talk about. And I can be present in that, or can I help you explore that? Not like, hey, can I convince you of all your, wrong thoughts? No, but how can we explore that together? Or I'm always going to be here no matter how far you go. Because God does the same with us, right? He sent his son to die for us, knowing everything we were going to do. He didn't say, well, there's going to be some people. No, he sent his son to die on all of those for everybody. Exactly. And knowing if you were going to choose or not choose. And he says, I will always be here. I've built this bridge. I'm not going to force you to cross it, but I'm not going to end my end of the bridge, right?
Yeah.
Until that day, judgment day comes, this bridge is open, and I hope that you will cross it.
Nice. I like it. Okay, so I have another question for you. A lot of people say, like, at least, just because, as like a filler, because they don't know what else to say. I feel like also with that, a lot of people are afraid of other people's trauma. What advice could you give, or do you have for the people in those situations?
I think really for many of us, or at least I can speak for myself, a lot of times I want to help you out of your trauma, right?
Yeah.
So I want to try to give you some wisdom advice or something that will help make it better. But a lot of times there isn't. There just isn't anything I can do other than to communicate that you're not alone. So I think if we use less words and just say, I'm here for you, or thank you for sharing with me, or how can I help, and being willing, or just again that presence, checking in on someone, being able to just be a part of their life without thinking you're going to have the answers. Or sometimes people, like you said, you can be afraid of their trauma because I don't know I've never lost someone like that, or I haven't been homeless, or I haven't been whatever it might be that they're experiencing. And I think that's where Brene talks about having empathy, as being able to tap into something that you might have felt like. So maybe I've never been homeless, but I have experienced loss. Yeah. Maybe I have never struggled to make ends meet, but I have experienced times where I didn't have everything I thought I needed. And that's that tapping into, without my telling that story to you, but being able to say, I can't imagine, or I think I understand what you're saying, this, or it sounds like you're feeling lost or alone. Like, how did I feel during that time, and how can I help tap into this so that you don't feel alone. You feel connection.
I like that. And I definitely have recognized, like, in myself, as I've been in the process of going from a person that tried to fix everything to somebody who now can just sit there and be like, I'm sorry. I understand that I don't understand. And I think that's a very valuable thing that I've been, like, in the process of learning. I'm not perfect, but, like, and also that concept of, like, checking in on people. Like, I know about what you're going through, and I can't be there for you all the time, but I will put some effort and time in to make sure you're doing okay every now and then. I can't fix it, but I can still be there for you. I can still allow you a space to share if you need to share. I can still, all of these different things. So in exactly what you were talking about, what boundaries do you have for yourself, or what boundaries would you recommend for people? So that way, because I know I've also experienced, like, getting way too involved, and then it starts affecting my personal life and stuff like that. So what would you advise?
Well, first, I just want to say that good job on learning some of those things. I am
I'm
much
getting
older
there.
than
I'm
you.
trying.
Well, you're a
It's
lot
not easy.
earlier than I am. I think some of that goes back to our own. I know that growing up as the oldest child of a divorced family, one of the things that role often happens is the people pleaser and the fixer.
Yeah.
And so for years, I didn't understand that. And then, but learned that that's where I ended up. And now I am slowly trying to undo that, because there's that continuum again, right? I can't fix everything, but I also don't want to always come back and say, well, there's nothing I can do.
You're on your own, kid.
Right, because you want someone to feel that connection.
Yeah.
So I think in that you do have to look at, what are my personal boundaries? What are the things that I can handle? What are the things that I should handle? What are the things that you should handle, but I couldn't be with you?
Yeah.
Or what are the things that maybe you have to do on your own and I can cheer you on or check with it? And so I think it's really a day-to-day balance with any relationship, because I might be able to help you with more things than I might help somebody else based on a large variety of things, where my capacity is at any given day. If you call me and I'm in the middle of getting ready to teach something, or I'm like, oh, hey, I was just sitting there on a Saturday afternoon, so I'm happy to help, or those types of things.
Yeah.
So my encouragement is, when people find themselves resenting the other person or the issue, that's probably a good time to say, hey, I might have been giving more than I had the capacity to give, or I might be enabling more, or I might be, raising my hand to help out too many times, because if I can't take care of myself, I can't show up fully for you. So Oprah Winfrey says that we have to take care of ourselves so that we can bring ourselves.
That is so interesting. Oh, dang. I'm like evaluating this on my life, and I'm like, wow, I've been there before. Oh
yeah, and we're not going to be perfect, right? It's that balance.
Yeah.
but sometimes we get to the point where it's so off balance that then we find ourselves falling, and then we're not helpful. And as Christians, we want to be able to be present and helpful and bring joy and hope and love.
Yeah.
But to do that, I have to make sure that my connection with God is good, or I'm not going to be able to be a connection with you.
Nice. I like that. I really like that. So I'm all done with all my questions. Do you have anything else you'd like to share? Any other final comments? Any other questions that you might have?
I think what TSM does is great. I think that there is a great need for peer support in schools, and I think understanding trauma helps me to understand, not that I don't even have to know your trauma to understand that maybe there's something that has happened in your life that affects how you live, trust, make choices. And even that much is being trauma informed, right? When something happens, and if I just think, I wonder if there's more to the story. You know how people like, oh, that idiot, or this person's so mean, or this, and I'm like, and I always wonder, if there's more to the story. I was with someone and they said, oh, I don't know why there's so many homeless. There's jobs everywhere. They're just lazy. And I said, well, maybe that's true for some, but I wonder what their story is that made it so that they feel like that's their only option, to sit on the street corner, or to be cold all night, or to not have any place to go. I bet there's more to the story than we realize. And just that much, I think, is helpful for all of us as humanity to know, and especially as students, because when we can get in that mindset, we find ourselves maybe not going down roads of judgment and producing shame much earlier. And so you don't have to be my age trying to unlearn things that your age is like, hey, I'm making these choices now to learn and to be aware of what's happening around me, so that I can be a better light to the world.
I think that's very important, asking that question of why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you in the position that you're in? Why did you punch a kid over an Oreo? Like, why are you on the street corner? What happened in your life? And I think that question, is so very important. And so,
and they may not even know, but just to say that there's probably a reason. Most people don't just be like, I feel like getting in trouble today. Yeah. Even little kids, like, I just feel like wreaking havoc. Yeah. There's usually something, and they may not know, but we might be able to ask enough questions in our head to say, I wonder, that makes our response different, which keeps them out of getting into the Hulk mode.
I like it. I really like it. So thank you guys again for listening. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comment section down below. Subscribe, because that makes us very happy. Click the little bell icon so you get the notifications when we get there. So please follow us on all of our socials. We have an Instagram, a TikTok. We have Facebook. You can find us here on YouTube as well. And so Robin, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
No, if I can ever be helpful, my website is robinblumenthal.org, or you can email me at robinjblumenthal@gmail.com. And again, the world changes when each of us begins to change the world around us. you guys are doing that, and I'm excited to help inspire you if indeed that happened.
And you guys can do it too. This is our monthly podcast. You can find us every last Saturday of the month. So tune in for the next one, which I can't give any spoilers for, but it's going to be pretty good. So stay on the lookout for that. You can also find us at our website at TucsonStudentMinistries.org. And there you can find more information about how you can get involved, how you can donate, whatever you want to do. So I think we're going to... And resources. You can find us there for resources too. I think we're going to pray out. Would you like to pray for us?
I'd be happy to do that. Father God, I'm so thankful for this group of students, Lord, that have a heart for reaching other students, for how to be able to change the world that they live in. So God, it begins with us turning towards you. So I thank you for all that you have given us, the wisdom you've given us. I thank you for new science that just reminds us of the amazing way you've created us, that we are creatures and people that need to connect. And thank you for sending your son to connect with us most of all, God. And may we, each of us here listening and each of us present, be the ones that bring your hope and your light and your love to the world. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you guys again. Again, hit subscribe. We will see you guys later. Bye-bye.